When Kong Min-Jae, the billionaire kingpin who ruled Seoul's underworld with silence, fear, and absolute control, noticed that his black maid didn't arrive at exactly 6 a.m. for the first time in 5 years, he felt something he had buried long ago stir beneath his tailored suit and guarded heart. And against every rule that kept him alive, he ignored his men, got into his car himself, and went looking for her. Only to step into a blood-stained apartment where Kamala lay broken on the floor, bruised and unconscious, her dark skin marked by violence meant to erase her. A sight so intimate and enraging that it shattered the distance between master and servant in a single breath, awakening a ruthless protectiveness that would expose her hidden identity, reveal betrayals within his empire, and ignite a chain of love, blood, and war so devastating it would force the most feared mafia boss in Asia to choose. Between the empire he built with violence and the woman whose silence carried a truth powerful enough to destroy it all, Kong Min-Jae did not tolerate disruption. His life operated on precision. Meetings began at the exact minute scheduled. His coffee arrived at his desk at 7:43 a.m. without fail, and his daily briefings were delivered in silence unless he asked a question. Control was not merely a preference. It was the architecture of his existence. In a world built on violence and unpredictability, order was the only luxury that mattered. Which was why, at 7:44 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, when his coffee did not arrive, Kong's pen stopped mid-signature. He looked up from the contract spread across his desk. The door to his office remained closed. The hallway beyond sat silent. 7:45 a.m. Still nothing. Kong set down his pen with deliberate care and pressed the intercom. Where is she? A pause. Then his head of security, Jae-sung, cleared his throat. Miss Kamala hasn't arrived yet, sir. Kong's jaw tightened. In 5 years, Kamala had never been late. Not once. Not through monsoons that flooded the streets. Not through transit strikes. Not even the morning after her grandmother's funeral, when her eyes had been swollen, but her hands steady as she placed his coffee on the desk at precisely 7:43. Find her, Kong said. We've tried calling. No answer. It's possible she's simply. Find her. The intercom clicked off. Kong returned his attention to the contract, but the words blurred. His mind had already shifted, cataloging the disruption like a foreign object lodged beneath skin. Kamala was a constant. Constants did not break pattern. By 9 a.m., Jae-sung returned with his second-in-command, both wearing the carefully neutral expressions men used when delivering bad news. Her phone's off, Jae-sung said. Neighbors haven't seen her since yesterday. Her landlord says she's always quiet, always pays on time. No trouble. Send someone to check her apartment. Sir, with respect, she could be ill, or dealing with a personal matter. We could simply. I don't pay you to speculate. Kong rose from his desk, already reaching for his coat. Where does she live? Both men exchanged glances. You're not seriously, Jae-sung began. Kong's gaze cut through the objection like a blade. Address. Now. Kong had not driven himself anywhere in over a decade. Men in his position did not navigate traffic or parallel park. Yet 20 minutes later, he sat behind the wheel of a black sedan, weaving through Seoul's midday congestion with the same cold efficiency he applied to everything else. Kamala lived in Songbuk-dong, in one of those older buildings where the paint peeled and the elevator groaned. Kong climbed the stairs to the 4th floor, his footsteps echoing in the narrow stairwell. The hallway smelled of kimchi and bleach. Apartment 403 sat at the end of the corridor, its doors slightly ajar. Kong's hand moved automatically to the gun holstered beneath his coat. He nudged the door open with his shoulder. The scene inside made his blood freeze, then ignite. The apartment had been destroyed. Furniture overturned, cushions slashed, belongings scattered across the floor like debris from an explosion. Broken glass glittered near the window. A table lamp lay shattered, its bulb still faintly warm. And in the center of the wreckage, collapsed near the overturned sofa, was Kamala. She lay on her side, One arm twisted beneath her, the other stretched toward the door as if she'd tried to crawl. Her shirt was torn, stained dark with blood. Bruises bloomed across her brown skin in violent shades of purple and black. Her jaw, her shoulder, her ribs visible through the ripped fabric. But it was her face that broke something inside Kong's chest. Her left eye had swollen shut. Blood had dried beneath her nose and at the corner of her mouth. A gash split her eyebrow, still seeping red. Against the richness of her dark skin, the injuries stood out like brands, deliberate, cruel, meant to destroy. Kong crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to his knees beside her. His fingers found her throat, pressing against the pulse point. For one terrible moment, he felt nothing. Then there, faint, thready, but present. Kamala. His voice came out rougher than intended. He touched her shoulder, careful of the bruises. Kamala, can you hear me? Her eyelids fluttered. A soft, broken sound escaped her lips. Not quite a word, just air and pain. Kong's hands moved with surprising gentleness, checking for broken bones, assessing the damage. Ribs likely fractured. Possible concussion. Internal bleeding. He couldn't be sure. But she was alive, and that was enough. For now. He slid one arm beneath her shoulders, the other under her knees, and lifted her against his chest. She weighed almost nothing, or perhaps rage had made him stronger. Her head lolled against his shoulder, her breath warm and shallow against his throat. The hallway was still empty when he carried her out. No neighbors peering through doorways. No witnesses. Typical. In buildings like this, people learn not to see. Kong settled Kamala into the passenger seat, tilting it back so she could breathe easier. Her hand had curled into the fabric of his shirt, unconscious but holding on. He left it there. As he rounded the car to the driver's side, he pulled out his phone. Jae-sung, I need Dr. Choi at the penthouse in 20 minutes. Discreet, prepared for severe trauma. He paused, his gaze drifting to Kamala's battered face through the windshield. And start pulling every piece of surveillance footage within a 10-block radius of Songbukdong. Traffic cameras, security feeds, everything. What exactly are we looking for? Kong's voice dropped to something colder than winter. Whoever did this. He ended the call and slid behind the wheel. Kamala's breathing had steadied slightly, each exhale a small victory against the damage. Kong's hands tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. Someone had walked into her apartment. Someone had raised their fists to her. Someone had left her to die on the floor of a place she should have been safe. Someone had made the last mistake of their life. Kong pulled into traffic with lethal calm, Kamala's weight a warm reminder in the seat beside him. He didn't pray, had never believed in anything beyond what he could control, but in that moment, he made a promise to the silence. Whoever did this has already signed their death warrant. Kamala woke to the smell of antiseptic and something floral, jasmine, maybe, and knew immediately she wasn't in her apartment. The ceiling above her was too high, painted a soft cream that caught the afternoon light filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows. The mattress beneath her body was too soft, the sheets too fine. Even the air felt different, purified, temperature-controlled, expensive. She tried to sit up. Pain exploded through her ribs like shrapnel, stealing her breath. Her left eye wouldn't open fully. Her hands flew to her torso, finding bandages wrapped tight around her chest, and 4 needle taped to her inner arm. Don't move. The voice came from her right. Kamala's head snapped toward it. Another mistake, as her vision swam, and found Kong Min-Jae sitting in an armchair near the window, watching her with that unreadable expression he wore like armor. He looked different outside the office. No suit jacket, just a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. His hair, usually perfectly styled, fell slightly across his forehead. But his eyes held the same cold calculation, the same absolute control. Where am I? Her voice came out hoarse, scraped raw. My home. Panic clawed up Kamala's throat. She pushed herself upright despite the agony screaming through her body, yanking the 4 from her arm. Blood welled from the puncture site. You had no right. You were unconscious in a destroyed apartment with 3 fractured ribs, a concussion, and internal bruising. Kong's tone didn't rise, but something sharp edged beneath it. What would you have preferred? That I left you there? I would have preferred you minded your own business. Kamala swung her legs over the side of the bed, her bare feet finding plush carpet. The room tilted. She gripped the mattress, willing the nausea down. You are my business. I'm your assistant. That doesn't give you. Someone tried to kill you. Kong rose from the chair with predatory grace. In your home, while you were alone and vulnerable. So yes, Miss Kamala, you are very much my business now. The use of her formal name stung more than it should have. Kamala forced herself to stand, even as her legs trembled. I appreciate the concern, but I need to leave. I have responsibilities. I need to file a police report. The police have already been notified. Your landlord has been compensated for damages. Your belongings are being recovered and cleaned. Kong crossed the room, stopping just out of reach. You're not going anywhere until Dr. Choi clears you, and even then, you're staying here. Excuse me. This mansion has 24-hour security, surveillance on every entrance, and guards who've been with me for a decade. Your apartment building has a broken lock and neighbors who didn't hear you scream. His gaze held hers, unyielding. Until we find who did this, you remain under my protection. I don't recall asking for your protection. You didn't have to. The words hung between them, weighted with something Kamala couldn't name. She wanted to argue, to throw his arrogance back in his face, but her body chose that moment to betray her. Her knees buckled. Kong caught her before she hit the floor, his hands firm around her waist. The touch sent an unexpected shock through her system, not pain, but awareness. Of his proximity, his warmth, the controlled strength in his grip. Stubborn, he muttered, guiding her back to the bed with surprising gentleness. Controlling, Kamala shot back, even as she sank onto the mattress. Something that might have been amusement flickered in Kong's eyes. You're not the first to notice. Dr. Choi returned an hour later, a severe woman in her 50s who examined Kamala with brisk efficiency while Kong watched from the doorway like a sentinel. The doctor asked questions Kamala didn't want to answer. How many times had she been struck? Had she lost consciousness? Could she remember her attacker's face? While rewrapping her ribs and replacing the 4 Kamala had torn out. 2 weeks of bed rest, minimum, Dr. Choi announced, snapping her medical bag shut. No strenuous activity. The ribs need time to heal, and that concussion could have complications if aggravated. 2 weeks. Kamala's stomach dropped. I can't. You will. Kong's tone left no room for negotiation. After the doctor left, a young woman arrived with a tray of food, soup, rice, and banchan arranged with the kind of care that suggested a professional kitchen. The smell made Kamala's stomach turn. I'm not hungry. Kong, who had returned to his chair by the window, didn't look up from the tablet in his hands. You need to eat. I said I'm not hungry. And I said you need to eat. Kamala glared at him, searching for cracks in that infuriating composure. Do you always steamroll over what people want? Only when what they want is self-destructive. Kong set down the tablet. Eat, or I'll have Dr. Choi put you on a feeding tube. You wouldn't dare. Test me. They stared at each other across the room. A battle of wills that might have been amusing under different circumstances. Finally, Kamala reached for the soup, each movement deliberate and defiant. She managed 3 spoonfuls before her stomach rebelled. Kong noticed. Of course he did. He noticed everything. Small amounts, he said, his voice softer. Every few hours. Your body's in shock. Kamala wanted to argue, but exhaustion dragged at her like an undertow. She set down the spoon and lay back against the pillows, hating how weak she felt. How vulnerable. Why are you doing this? The question escaped before she could stop it. Kong was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, he didn't look at her. You've worked for me for 5 years. In that time, you've never been late, never made a mistake, never asked for anything. He paused. You're the only constant in my life that's never tried to leverage it for gain. So this is gratitude. This is... Kong trailed off, something unreadable crossing his features. Insurance. You're valuable. I protect what's valuable to me. The words should have sounded cold, transactional. Instead, they settled in Kamala's chest like a warm stone. Night fell. Kamala drifted in and out of sleep, her dreams fractured and violent. Each time she woke gasping, she found Kong still there, sometimes working on his tablet, sometimes just watching the city lights through the window, but always present. At 3 a.m., when nightmares jolted her awake with a strangled cry, Kong was beside the bed before she'd fully surfaced. "You're safe," he said quietly. "You're here. You're safe." Kamala's breath came in ragged gulps. Without thinking, she reached out, and Kong took her hand. His palm was warm, calloused, steady. He sat on the edge of the mattress, his thumb tracing absent patterns across her knuckles until her breathing slowed. "I grew up in Nairobi," Kamala heard herself whisper. "In Kibera. Do you know what that is? One of the largest slums in Africa. My mother worked 3 jobs to send me to school. She used to say education was the only way out." Kamala's voice cracked. "She died when I was 16. After that, I had to." She stopped. The words lodged in her throat, sharp and dangerous. Kong waited, his hand still holding hers. But Kamala had already said too much. She pulled her hand back, turning her face toward the window. "Never mind. It doesn't matter." "It matters." "No." Kamala closed her eyes. "It doesn't." In the darkness, she felt rather than saw Kong lean closer. His voice dropped to barely a whisper, meant only for her. "Whoever you had to become to survive, Kamala, I understand more than you think." But Kamala kept her secrets locked tight, even as exhaustion pulled her back under. Some doors, once opened, could never be closed again. Kong's phone buzzed at 4:47 a.m. He glanced at Kamala, finally sleeping peacefully after hours of restless nightmares, before stepping into the hallway. Jae-sung's name glowed on the screen. "This had better be urgent," Kong said quietly, pulling the door shut behind him. "It is." Jae-sung's voice carried an edge Kong recognized as unease. "We've been running background checks like you ordered, diving deeper than the initial employment screening. And Kamala's history is too clean, sir. Almost manufactured. Her employment records before joining you only go back 6 years. Before that, nothing. No school transcripts, no previous addresses, no digital footprint. It's like she didn't exist before Seoul." Kong's jaw tightened. "People don't just appear from nowhere." "Exactly. So I had our team look at immigration records, cross-reference with international databases. We found something." A pause. "Her entry visa to South Korea was flagged by Interpol 7 years ago. Then the flag was mysteriously removed. The original passport she entered on? Kenyan, but under a different name." The hallway suddenly felt colder. "What name?" "Kamala Adeyemi, daughter of Okonkwo Adeyemi." Kong's blood went ice. He knew that name. Every person in his world knew that name. Okonkwo Adeyemi, the broker. One of Africa's most powerful crime lords, controlling everything from diamond trafficking to arms deals across 3 continents. A man whose syndicate had, 5 years ago, financed Kong's rivals during a territorial war that had cost Kong 12 men and nearly his life. "Are you certain?" Kong's voice had dropped to something dangerous.
Facial recognition confirms it's the same woman. She's been using an alias, Kamala Kumar, since arriving in Korea. Changed her surname, kept her first name. The employment agency that placed her with you? It's legitimate, but someone with serious resources could have planted false credentials. Kong ended the call without another word. He stood in the hallway for a long moment, processing the implications. Kamala, his assistant, his constant, the woman currently sleeping in his guest room, was the daughter of a man who'd tried to destroy him. She'd been in his home, his office, privy to his schedules and meetings and vulnerabilities for 5 years. And yet, Kong's mind worked through the evidence with cold precision. If Kamala had been planted as a spy, she'd had countless opportunities to sabotage him. Access to his files, knowledge of his movements, trust that could have been weaponized 1,000 different ways. But she'd never once used it. Instead, she'd been perfect, loyal, invisible in the way that made her indispensable, which meant either she was the most patient operative Kong had ever encountered, or something else was at play. Kong returned to the room. Kamala still slept, her face finally relaxed, the bruises standing out starkly against her dark skin in the pre-dawn light. She looked vulnerable, young, nothing like the daughter of a warlord. But appearances, Kong knew better than anyone, were weapons. Kamala woke to find Kong sitting in the same chair as before, but something had shifted. The air felt charged, dangerous. His gaze held a new weight when it landed on her. "We need to talk," he said. Kamala's instincts flared, the ones that had kept her alive through her childhood, through her escape, through 6 years of carefully constructed lies. She sat up slowly, ignoring the protest of her ribs. "About what?" "About who you really are." Kong leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Kamala Adeyemi. The name hit her like a physical blow. For a moment, she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The false identity she'd built so carefully, the life she'd constructed brick by careful brick, it all crumbled in 3 words. "I don't know what you're." "Don't." Kong's voice cut through the lie like a blade. "I've had my people digging into your background. The inconsistencies were always there. I just never had reason to look closely before. Your passport, your work history, all of it leads back to a very interesting name. Okonkwo Adeyemi." Kamala's hands fisted in the sheets. Flight or fight responses warred in her chest, but with broken ribs and nowhere to run, she had only one option left. "The truth. He's my father," she said quietly. "Or was, in any way that matters. I haven't spoken to him in 7 years. The same man who financed the Choice Syndicate's war against me 5 years ago." "Yes." Kong's expression remained unreadable. "Did he send you here?" "No." The word came out fierce, desperate. "I came here to get away from him. From that life. From everything he represents. People don't just walk away from men like Okonkwo Adeyemi." "I didn't walk." Kamala met his gaze, her own burning with something raw. "I ran. When I was 19, he tried to marry me off to a rival warlord to consolidate power. A man 3 times my age who'd killed his previous 2 wives. I refused. He locked me in a compound for 6 months." Her voice steadied, though her hands trembled. "My mother had already been dead for 3 years. There was no one to protect me. So I waited until the guards got careless, and I escaped with nothing but the clothes on my back and my mother's jewelry hidden in my bra." Kong said nothing, just watched her with that penetrating stare that saw too much. "I sold everything I had to buy forged documents and a ticket to the farthest place I could imagine. Korea seemed safe, anonymous. I thought if I could disappear into a city this size, become someone so ordinary that no one would look twice, I could finally be free." She laughed bitterly. "I became a cleaner, then an assistant. I learned Korean, adopted a new surname, buried Kamala Adeyemi so deep I almost forgot she existed. And the employment agency? Legitimate. I worked for them for a year before they placed me with you. I was good at what I did, efficient, quiet, forgettable. That's all it took." Kamala's voice cracked. "I never meant to deceive you. I just wanted to survive. Your father's syndicate financed the people who tried to kill me. I know." Kamala's eyes burned. "I didn't know you then. Didn't know what you did or who you were until after I'd already been hired. By the time I realized the connection, I'd been working for you for 3 months. I thought about running again, but..." She swallowed hard. "This was the first place I'd ever felt safe. The first time in my life I wasn't afraid every single day. So I stayed. And I swore I would never let my past touch you." Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken implications. Finally, Kong spoke. "Someone knew who you really are. Someone found you despite all your precautions. That's why they came after you. Kamala nodded slowly. My father has people everywhere. If he's found me, then leaving my protection would be suicide. Kong stood, his decision already made. You stay here, under guard, until we neutralize the threat. You should fire me. Send me away. I'm a liability. No. Kong moved closer, his voice dropping. You're the one person in my organization who's never wanted anything from me except to be left alone. That's worth more than you know. Kamala stared at him, something dangerously close to hope unfurling in her chest. I don't understand. You will. Kong turned toward the door, already pulling out his phone to issue new security protocols. He didn't see the figure in the hallway. His Lieutenant Min-Ho, who'd been approaching to deliver the morning briefing, freeze at the sound of the name awakens. Didn't see Min-Ho's expression shift from confusion to calculation as he absorbed every word of the conversation. Didn't see him slowly back away, phone already in hand, texting a contact he'd kept hidden for 3 years. Found her. Adeyemi's daughter. With Kong, asterisk. The reply came instantly. Asterisk secure her. Payment as discussed. Asterisk. Min-Ho pocketed his phone and disappeared down the hallway, his footsteps silent on the expensive carpet. In the room, Kamala closed her eyes, unaware that her worst nightmare had just begun. Min-Ho had served Kong Min-Jae for 8 years. 8 years of loyalty. 8 years of taking bullets, burying bodies, and swallowing his pride while watching a cleaning woman receive more of Kong's attention than any of his sworn men. 8 years of waiting for Kong to see his value, to offer him more than the role of glorified guard dog. And in 8 years, Kong had never once looked at him the way he'd looked at Kamala Adeyemi through that doorway. Min-Ho sat in his car 3 blocks from Kong's mansion, fingers drumming against the steering wheel. The burner phone felt heavy in his pocket, a lifeline to the Zhao Syndicate, Kong's most persistent rivals. They'd approached him 6 months ago with promises of wealth and position. He'd refused then, but that was before he understood what Kamala really was. Who she was. The daughter of awakens Adeyemi wasn't just a cleaning woman with a tragic past. She was leverage. A nuclear bomb wrapped in pretty brown skin and borrowed names. The Zhao family had been searching for a way to cripple Kong for years, and Min-Ho had just delivered them the perfect weapon. His phone buzzed. A message from Zhao's second-in-command, a vicious man named Chun. Meeting arranged. Tomorrow, 8 p.m. Neutral ground, the old textile factory in Seoul. Tell Kong it's about territory disputes. Bring the girl, asterisk. Min-Ho allowed himself a small smile. By this time tomorrow, he'd be second-in-command of the Zhao Syndicate, and Kong would finally understand what it cost to overlook loyal men in favor of pretty distractions. He typed back, confirmed. Absolutely not. Kong's voice cut through the tension in his study like a blade. Jae-sung and Min-Ho stood before his desk, both armed with arguments, but only one with ulterior motives. Sir, the Zhao family is offering a truce, Min-Ho insisted, his voice perfectly calibrated to sound reasonable. They've agreed to neutral ground, limited security on both sides. This could end the territorial disputes that have cost us 3 warehouses and 2 men this month alone. The Zhao family doesn't offer truces. They offer traps, which is why we'll have countermeasures in place. Min-Ho gestured to the tablet in his hands. The textile factory has multiple exit points. We'll have snipers positioned on the surrounding buildings. Limited entry points we can control. If it's a trap, we'll see it coming. Kong's gaze flickered to Jae-sung. Your assessment? Jae-sung shifted uncomfortably. The terms are suspicious, but Min-Ho's security plan is solid. If they wanted an ambush, they'd choose terrain that favored them, not neutral ground with sight lines we can control. They specifically requested Ms. Kamala's presence, Min-Ho added carefully. As a show of good faith, they want to know Kong Min-Jae negotiates without hidden cards. That was the hook. Min-Ho watched Kong's jaw tighten, saw the calculation behind those cold eyes. Kong would never admit it aloud, But keeping Kamala close had become more than protection. It had become necessity. She's still recovering from a concussion and broken ribs. The meeting is tomorrow evening. Dr. Choi says she'll be cleared for limited activity by then. Min-ho pressed his advantage. Sir, with respect, if we refuse every negotiation because Ms. Kamala is involved, we show weakness. We show that she matters too much. That makes her an even bigger target. The logic was sound. Kong knew it. Min-ho could see the internal battle playing across his boss's features. Protection versus strategy, emotion versus control. Finally, Kong nodded. Double the security detail. Kamala doesn't leave my sight during the meeting. And if anything feels wrong, we abort immediately. Understood, sir. Min-ho left the study with triumph burning in his chest. As he passed Kamala's room, he glanced at the closed door and felt nothing. No guilt, no hesitation. She was collateral damage in a game she should never have entered. By tomorrow night, Kong would learn that loyalty couldn't be bought with indifference. Kamala stood before the mirror in the guest room, barely recognizing herself. The bruises had faded to yellow-green. Her eye had opened fully, and the sharp pain in her ribs had dulled to a persistent ache. Dr. Choi had cleared her for minimal activity, which Kong had interpreted as standing upright while heavily guarded. She adjusted the black blazer Kong's people had provided. Expensive, tailored, professional. The kind of armor she'd worn for 5 years while pretending to be invisible. Except now invisibility was no longer an option. A knock at the door. Kong entered without waiting for permission, his gaze sweeping over her with that same assessing intensity that made her skin prickle. You don't have to do this, he said. You've told me that 3 times today, and you've ignored me 3 times. Kamala turned to face him fully. If my presence helps end this conflict peacefully, then I should be there. I'm tired of being protected like I'm made of glass. You have 3 fractured ribs. I've survived worse. Something dark flickered in Kong's eyes, understanding, maybe, or recognition of a kindred stubbornness. He crossed the room, stopping close enough that Kamala caught the scent of his cologne, subtle and expensive. Stay within arm's reach of me at all times, he said quietly. If I tell you to run, you run. No arguments. No heroics. I'm not a hero. No. Kong's gaze held hers. You're something far more dangerous. Before Kamala could ask what he meant, Jae-sung appeared in the doorway. Vehicles are ready, sir. Snipers are in position. Kong nodded, his hand moving unconsciously to the small of Kamala's back as they walked toward the elevator. The touch was possessive, protective, and entirely inappropriate for an employer and assistant. Kamala didn't pull away. The textile factory loomed against the evening sky like a corpse, windows shattered, walls tagged with graffiti, the smell of rust and decay thick in the air. 3 black SUVs pulled into the abandoned lot, and Kamala's instincts screamed danger. Something's wrong, she whispered. Kong felt it too. His hand tightened on her arm. Jae-sung, status on the snipers. A pause. Then Jae-sung's voice came through the radio, tight with alarm. Sir, the snipers aren't responding. Neither position is answering. Kong's gun was out before the sentence finished. Fall back. Now. The first shot shattered the windshield. Then the world exploded into chaos. Gunfire erupting from the factory windows, from the rooftops, from vehicles that screeched into the lot behind them. Not a negotiation. An execution. Go, go, go. Kong shoved Kamala toward the rear exit as his men returned fire. Glass rained down. Someone screamed. The air filled with cordite and blood. Kamala ran, bent low, her ribs screaming protest. Kong's hand was on her back, propelling her forward, when a second SUV exploded in flames. The shockwave threw them both to the ground. Kamala's head cracked against concrete. Stars burst across her vision. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard Kong shouting her name. Felt hands. Wrong hands. Too many hands, dragging her backward. She tried to fight. Tried to scream. Then something struck the back of her skull, and the world went black. When Kong finally fought his way through the ambush to where she'd fallen, all he found was blood on the pavement and tire tracks leading into the night. Kamala was gone. Kamala woke to the smell of mildew and salt water. Her head throbbed where she'd been struck, and when she tried to move, rough rope bit into her wrists. She was bound to a metal chair in what looked like an abandoned warehouse. Concrete floor, rusted beams overhead, the distant sound of waves against a dock. Not the Zhao Syndicate's usual territory. Somewhere coastal. Incheon, maybe, or one of the smaller ports. Footsteps echoed across the concrete. Kamala's vision focused slowly on the figure approaching from the shadows, and her blood turned to ice. She knew that walk, that build, that face she'd spent 7 years trying to forget. "Hello, little sister." Chima Adeyemi smiled at her with all the warmth of a shark. Her older brother had inherited their father's height, his brutal charisma, and his complete absence of mercy. The last time Kamala had seen him, he'd been the one to drag her back when she'd first tried to escape at 17. "No," Kamala breathed. "No, it wasn't the Zhao family. It was you." The Zhao family were useful idiots. They thought they were orchestrating an ambush. Chima crouched before her chair, his eyes, the same dark brown as hers, glittering with malice. "They have no idea I've been planning this for 6 months. Ever since Father's network finally traced you to Seoul." "Father sent you?" "Father is dying." Chima's smile widened. "Liver cancer. 6 months to live, maybe less. Which means the Adeyemi Empire needs a new leader. But the old man won't name an heir until his precious daughter comes home." Kamala's stomach dropped. "I'm not going back. You don't have a choice." Chima stood, pulling out his phone. "See, I made a deal with Kong Min-Jae's lieutenant. Minho, ambitious little snake that he is. He delivered you to the Zhao family's trap. They think they're holding you for ransom. But really," he typed something, then showed her the screen. Security footage. Kong's mansion, his warehouses, his legitimate business fronts, all under simultaneous attack. Fires bloomed. Explosions shattered windows. Men in tactical gear stormed entrances. While Kong scrambles to save you, Chima continued, "My people are dismantling his empire piece by piece. By dawn, he'll have nothing left but ashes and debt. And you'll be on a plane back to Nairobi, whether you like it or not. Kong will kill you. Kong will have to choose. Come after you and watch his organization burn, or save his empire and let you go." Chima's expression turned cold. Men like Kong Min-Jae don't choose love over power. They can't. It's not in their nature. He was wrong. Kamala knew he was wrong. But a small, terrified part of her whispered, "What if he's right?" Kong stood in the ruins of his Gangnam warehouse, ash settling on his shoulders like snow. 3 warehouses destroyed. 2 office buildings bombed. 17 men dead, 12 more in hospitals. The attacks had been coordinated, surgical, devastating. And they were still happening. "Sir." Jae-sung approached, tablet in hand, his face grim. "We've identified the attackers. Private military contractors, expensive ones. Traced the funding back through 3 shell corporations to a single source." "Who?" "Okonkwo Adeyemi." Kong's hands clenched into fists. Not the Zhao family. Not his usual enemies. Kamala's father, the man she'd run from, the man she'd buried her identity to escape, had reached across continents to destroy everything Kong had built. "There's more." Jae-sung pulled up a video file. "This was sent to your private email 10 minutes ago." The screen showed Kamala bound to a chair, bruised but alive. A man Kong didn't recognize. Tall, imposing, with Kamala's features sharpened into something cruel, stood behind her. Kong Min-Jae. The man's accent carried the same lilting quality as Kamala's. "My name is Chima Adeyemi. I have something that belongs to me, and you have something my family wants, our sister's cooperation. Here are your options. Continue fighting, and watch your empire burn while Kamala is transported back to Nairobi to fulfill her duties to our family. Or surrender, dissolve your operations, and perhaps, I'll let her say goodbye before we leave. The video cut to Kamala. Even restrained, even beaten, her gaze burned with defiance. Don't listen to him, Kong. Don't you dare. A hand struck her across the face. The video ended. Kong watched it 3 more times, each viewing carving something deeper into his chest. Rage. Guilt. Something that felt dangerously close to despair. We've traced the video's origin to a warehouse in Incheon, Jae-sung said quietly. But sir, if we mobilize to rescue her, we leave our remaining assets undefended. The attacks are still ongoing. We're hemorrhaging resources, and the Seoul police are starting to ask questions we can't answer. What are you saying? Jae-sung met his gaze. I'm saying you need to choose. The organization or the girl. Kong turned back to the burning warehouse. Smoke spiraled into the Seoul night sky. A funeral pyre for the empire he'd spent 15 years building. Every board he'd sat on, every alliance he'd forged, every enemy he'd buried, all of it threatened by one woman with a past she couldn't escape. The logical choice was obvious. Cut losses. Rebuild. There were other assistants. Other constants. But logic had abandoned Kong the moment he'd found Kamala bleeding on her apartment floor. He pulled out his phone and dialed Minho's number. It rang once before going to voicemail, a confirmation of guilt if Kong had needed one. His next call was to his weapons supplier. I need everything you have. RPGs, incendiaries, enough firepower to level a city block. Kong, Jae-sung started. And pull every man we have left. Everyone. I don't care if it leaves the warehouses unguarded. Sir, if we do this, we're exposed. Vulnerable. It could take years to recover. Then we'll recover. Kong's voice dropped to something lethal. But first, we're going to Incheon. We're getting Kamala back. And we're going to make sure Chima Adeyemi understands exactly what it costs to touch what's mine. Jae-sung stared at him. You're choosing her over the empire. I'm choosing both. Because Kamala is part of this empire now, and I protect what's mine. Kong turned, his expression colder than Jae-sung had ever seen it. Gather the men. Arm them for war. And find me Minho. I want him alive when I get back. And the warehouses? The businesses? Let them burn. Kong's smile was a terrible thing. We'll build new ones from the ashes of the Adeyemi family. In Incheon, Kamala watched through a grimy window as armed men patrolled the perimeter. 12 guards, rotating shifts every 4 hours. The warehouse sat on an isolated pier. One rowed in, water on 3 sides. A perfect kill box if anyone tried to mount a rescue. Chima had planned well, but he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed Kamala was still the terrified 19-year-old who'd failed to escape the first time. She wasn't. Kamala tested the ropes binding her wrists, feeling for weaknesses. The guard nearest the door was young, inexperienced. He checked his phone more than he watched his prisoner. The shift change happened at midnight. 2 hours of chaos when communication broke down. If she could get free, if she could reach the water, the warehouse door exploded inward. Not midnight. Not 2 hours from now. Now. And through the smoke and chaos, backlit by flames, walked Kong Min-Jae with murder in his eyes. Behind him, an army. Chima had been right about one thing. Men like Kong didn't choose love over power. They chose both, and destroyed anyone who forced them to decide.